when you're locking up these contracts or when you're negotiating with sellers, how does the buyer make money, right? So we know this, we know one thing, right? There's three types of buyers out there. You have your landlords, right? Everybody nod your head if we know landlords, right? So when we're identifying a property, think about this. If it has a tenant, right, chances are our buyer is going to be a landlord, right? This makes sense. You guys, the whole talk today, you're gonna be like, well, that's common sense, but I promise you some of the biggest teams in the country weren't doing it. So if you're not doing it, don't feel bad. So if my end buyer is going to be a landlord and there's a tenant, right? Hannah is buying a duplex in about 8 days, right? Mm-hmm. So she is the buyer in kind of this situation. When you're evaluating that property, what did you want to know? How long is left on their lease, right? Mm-hmm. Right? Because that's going to affect the way that your buyer, or Hannah in this case, what she can do with that property. Again, I know this sounds simple, but so if it's somebody that's got like 8 months, 6 months, 9 months, 10 months left on their lease, well, our only buyer is going to be a landlord, right? So now we need to identify or evaluate, analyze this property a little bit differently, right? 70% of ARV doesn't mean jack squat, right? Because that's a rehabber number, right? So in this case, you need to understand in this market, whatever market you're in, what are landlords paying for properties? And this will vary wildly across the country, right? In California and Miami, you know, they're on like a 0.5 rent multiplier, which means they'll pay $400,000 for something that rents for $1,000 a month, right? It's or 0.5 would be 200,000. I'm sorry. And does everybody understand what that kind of rule of thumb is on the rent multiplier? I feel like I'm using the wrong word, but basically it says like if a property rents for $1,000 a month, it's worth $100,000. The 1% rule. That's what it is. I'm sorry. Sorry.
I was like, it's almost more like 1.5 now with the current rental market. But
here it is for sure.
Yeah.
So, so what I'm saying is, you know, in a normal market, if a property rents for $8,000 a month, a buyer is willing to pay $100,000, right? Now, we got to stop and think a little bit. Who are we selling to, right? We're selling to cash buyers, right? So what do we do as a wholesaler? We're offering a property at a discount. So to me, let me just kind of run through the way I would think about this. If it's $1,000 rent and we're in a market where that holds true, where it's a 1%, then I probably want to send this out to my wholesalers at 85,000 or 90, or to my end buyers at 85, 90 max if it's in great shape. So now what does that mean? Well, now if I'm going to send it out to my buyers at 85 because I want this deal to sell, right? Then I need to do what? Probably contract it at 65 if I want to make 20. Does that make sense to everybody so far? Right? Are you kind of tracking that? Cool. So now, if you're in a market that's like a 2%, like Ohio or some of the northern states, well, if it's renting for 1,000, they want to pay 50 for it, right? They want double the return. So in those markets, and this is why it gets difficult to work in some of the smaller, even northern markets, is because if it's renting for 1,000 and the buyer wants to buy it for 50 or 60,000, well, my God, I got to get it for 30. Which this is where you start to get into the really tight margins, and you can't make 20,000. Maybe you're only going to make 5 or 10, and then you just have to decide for yourself: do you want to be in a market that's more active? Then there's other markets where it's maybe 1.5, and you can do the math, right? Just understanding what properties are selling at and what the rent is will tell you about where your buyers are going to be. Does that kind of make sense?
Yeah, I was gonna say, so that's like our first level of buyers, right? There are different categories of buyers. So we're starting with the end in mind.
Yep,
is
100%.
Really, I mean, I used to work with David's dispositions team, and that's how everything went down. It was like acquisitions had to be able to sell the deal to dispositions. If it doesn't make sense in the disposition side, then acquisitions isn't ever going to make sense. And you guys are going to go back and spin your wheels or waste money marketing something that you already know you can't sell. Better to save yourself time and money on the front end. Yeah,
because nobody wants to, you don't want to waste your time if you're the one doing all the, if you're kind of running solo right now, because it's just to wear you out, right? Like if you had me running your dispo and you just gave me crap deals constantly, after 2 months even, I'm going to quit, right? Like just the best person in the world is going to quit.